I'd like to reconvene this meeting at 6:02 to the regular scheduled school board meeting. Present we have Director Griffin, Director Barney, Director Moore, Director Peterson, Superintendent New, and myself, Director Wilson. And I'd like you all to stand as Federal Way School JROTC presents the colors.
Hut. Guard. Right shoulder. Arms. Forward. Arch. Low guard. Pull. Face. Reason. Colors.
I pledge allegiance
Carry. Colors. Right. Face. Forward. Arch. Hold guard. Oh.
You can be seated.
I love it.
Thank you. And thank you, JROTC. We just noticed we had a full female color guard in front of us, and that's pretty exciting. So thank you and congratulations on that. So we have a busy meeting and a packed meeting tonight, so we're going to move forward to make sure that we can get out of here on a reasonable time and in a reasonable hour. So without further ado, I'm looking for approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting, December 10th.
Madam President, I move that the board agenda for December 10th, 2013 be accepted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm looking for an approval for the consent agenda for tonight's meeting as well.
Madam President, I move that the consent agenda for December 10th, 2013 be accepted as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. First thing on our top tonight, on the agenda tonight, is a presentation around Race to the Top, and Marie Verhaar, Assistant Superintendent and Teaching for Learning, will introduce our speaker.
Good evening, President Wilson, directors, board directors, Superintendent New, Deputy Davidson, members of the audience. Tonight I am pleased to and privileged to introduce to you the Executive Program Director for Race to the Top, who is from the Puget Sound ESD. She's here tonight to give us an update on the Race to the Top progress and Federal Way's involvement. This is Jessica DeBarros.
Thank you, Marie, for that introduction, and thank you for having me here today. I hope to give you an overview of the Race to the Top grant, which Federal Way is a member and a leader of, along with 6 other districts in South King County, and let you know a little bit about the investments that Federal Way has received so far as a result of Race to the Top. Race to the Top is a $40 million grant over 4 years from the U.S. Department of Education, and the focus is on personalized learning. Our targets are similar to the Roadmap Project, which you might have heard of, which is a project that's been around for a few years, focused on South Seattle and South King County. And the Roadmap Project goal is to double the number of students receiving a college or career credential by 2020. Race to the Top is a large funding stream in support of the Roadmap Project, so our targets are similar to that. We have a lot of ambitious targets. For kindergarten readiness, we want 80% of students to be ready for kindergarten on our new WA-KIDS assessment by 2016. We want 86% of our third graders to be proficient in reading, and we are seeking to reduce the opportunity gaps in half in reading and in math. We have a focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And our goals for that are for fourth graders to be proficient at 80%, for 68% of students proficient in science, and to double the number of students taking algebra or higher in 8th grade, as well as reducing the math gaps in half. Our third category of investments is what we call Stay Strong, supporting students to be successful after graduating from high school. We are seeking a graduation rate of 87% by 2016, to increase our college enrollment to 71%, and to reduce our remediation rates when students go on to college significantly from 52 to 37%. This is a regional collective action approach, and there's a big focus on shared learning. So each of the 7 districts, including Federal Way, are working with one another to learn. For example, Federal Way is a leader in college and career readiness. So many of the strategies that Federal Way has been using for several years, we're looking to expand to the other districts in our consortium. As part of the Race to the Top application, a memorandum of understanding was signed by all of the superintendents, teachers, the union presidents, and the school board presidents as part of the grant application. For our preschool through 3rd grade investments, we're looking to have every district create a preschool through 3rd grade system that's aligned so that early learning providers are talking with kindergarten teachers and vice versa. We're also running a summer reading campaign that you might have heard about last summer. The next category of grants is STEM Strong. And for STEM Strong, we are actually providing digital learning tools focused on science and math in elementary and middle schools across the region. We're starting that this spring. As it relates to Stay Strong, one of the really exciting things that we're bringing to the rest of the region as a result of the success Federal Way has seen is the College Board assessments. So across the region, all 8th graders are taking Ready Step, 10th graders are taking PSAT, and 11th graders are taking SAT for free during the school day. We're really pleased that Race to the Top can provide for that and eliminate a barrier to college. We are also committed to taking the high school and beyond planning seriously and to make this a very formal document that is meaningful for students and similar standard across the region. We also have some foundational elements with Race to the Top. We have an investment fund that districts can apply for funds to improve teacher and leader professional development. And we're creating a regional data portal because we know we have a high student mobility rate across our region. So when a student transfers from one district to another, we want their information to follow them quickly so we can start teaching them right away and not lose any learning time. I've mentioned the investment funds. The investment funds, 4 of our projects are structured in this way, and the idea is that every district is in a different place. So we would like districts to be able to develop proposals to spend some of the Race to the Top money in a way that most meets their needs. So this allows local proposals that are tailored to the needs of each district. I mentioned the MOU. And the MOU designated an executive committee to make decisions about Race to the Top. We have 3 representatives from district management, of which Superintendent New is one of the members, 3 representatives from teacher union leaders, and the Federal Way Education Association President Jason Brown is one of the representatives on the committee for that, as well as 2 representatives from the at-large community, as well as the Puget Sound ESD superintendent. To give you a sense of where we are today, this has been quite a heavy lift. We, about almost exactly 1 year ago, received the grant, And it was great news. Everybody was really in a state of joy about this. It took a little while to get going because we had to negotiate with the Department of Education and finalize our scopes of work. So this year has been very exciting because in September we got our scope of work approved from the U.S. Department of Education, and we've awarded our first investment funds to districts. So the funding is going out and implementation is occurring. We've staggered our investment funds. So we have 4 investment funds. One is on teaching and leading. The second one is college and career readiness. The third is Project 3B, which is the preschool through 3rd grade investment fund. And then finally, we have Deep Dive, which is an intense school community partnership. So awards have gone out for the first 2, for Project 1 and Project 8. And Project 3B and Deep Dive 3 are coming in the next couple of months. Going to move forward here. So like I mentioned, Federal Way has been a real leader for the roadmap region in college and career readiness with your rigorous college prep course taking and implementation of next generation science standards and Common Core. Those were called out in our application as best practices that we're trying to employ across the region. As part of Race to the Top, the PSESD is actually contracting with Federal Way Public Schools to provide technical assistance to the other districts. I'm going to go through a lengthy list here of the investments in Federal Way so far this year from Race to the Top. So first, as a result of the first investment fund, Project 1 for teaching and leading, Federal Way was awarded a grant of $432,000 to implement school change teams. And on college and career readiness, the district was awarded a grant of about $200,000 for AP support, persistence, and completion. It's been really exciting to see Federal Way take that strategy to the next level. Like I said, we're going to be rolling out digital STEM tools in elementary and middle schools, which are high need. We have a set of high need schools, of which Federal Way has 11, that receive more resources from Race to the Top, because the idea is that we can make a bigger difference in our achievement gap by focusing on students most in need, although all schools benefit in some way from Race to the Top. We'll be building a new career exploration portal to connect students to internships and explore what they're interested in. We'll also be providing professional development for counselors in 5 high-need middle and high schools in Federal Way. We have college and career readiness assistance, which is part of the University of Washington DREAM project, where students who are earning their BAs as undergraduates can get paid to go work as assistants to counselors in our high schools and middle schools. So currently, Federal Way has a college and career readiness assistant from UW at Federal Way and also one at Totem Middle School, and that will be expanding with subsequent years of the grant. Like I mentioned, we had the College Board assessments given for free. That happened on October 16th of this year, and the SAT is coming up this spring. We also are building a data portal, like I mentioned, to combat learning loss associated with student mobility. And so that is something that we expect districts to be using by next year, and we're assuming it's ready. And then finally, we have additional potential funding that the districts are eligible to apply for through the investment fund process. We'll have several more rounds of the investment funds. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions I can answer?
I just want to thank you, Jessica. When you said it was a heavy lift, not only is it a heavy lift and you're doing the heavy lifting, but I was one of those that when we were celebrating that day, I was also very, I guess, cautiously optimistic at best, because accepting a grant of this magnitude from the federal government with this kind of focus from the feds is akin to inviting Dracula into your home, and Dracula has all of his powers. And so the work that you've done, John's done, but in particular you at the ESD, is to be commended. Especially that first year, getting the roadblocks and barriers and paving the way to the work that we're moving forward with. So thank you on behalf of all of us here in Federal Way. Thank you for the work that you've done in leading this work.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, board members?
I can only assume that you're going to be sharing the remedies on your, the grant overview 2016 targets. You'll be sharing what your strategies are for the graduation rate uptick. Is that?
So the question, what are the strategies to
Yes.
support increased graduation rates? Well, there are 3 different strategies. One is to support counselors and to create a strong advising program so that we have the Ready Step data for 8th graders. That's used to create a very strong high school and beyond plan that's personalized and that counselors follow students with and support them in achieving the goals of. We also have professional development for counselors as part of that strong advising system. Getting rid of the barrier of the College Board assessments. And then we have an investment fund for college and career readiness, which each district can tailor to their own needs. So for example, Federal Way is focused on closing the gap for students enrolled in AP and having them persist.
Thank you.
And I also want to add that the Project 8 with the suite of assessments was designed after our work in having the PSAT, the SAT, the Ready Step, and the other College Board assessments provided for our students grades 8 through 12 for free during the school day. First district in the country to do so. Now the region's doing it.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next up on our agenda is board term comments, and as most of you know, tonight we have 2 board members who have given a lot of time to this community and to this school district who are stepping down their seats as school board directors. And we have tonight 1 new member coming on board, and then we'll have the other new school board member coming on board at the January meeting. And I think it's always a bittersweet time because change is difficult. And maybe these folks sitting up here think it's time, and maybe time has come, but I also think there's a loss there because I think both Director Barney and Director Griffin have added very important things to this district and very different kinds of things. So before we do our oath of office for our new members, what we'd like to do is just take a minute and do a little bit of reflection. First starting with Superintendent New for both Director Griffin and Director Barney.
I want to start off by thanking both of you for the service that you've provided to the students and the families of Federal Way over the last 12 and 4 years respectively in your role as board members. I remember the day I first met you was in the interview. When I came in, I was last on the docket that day. And the look on your face, Angela, did not suggest that things would go well for me because you looked very tired. But I remember as the interview unfolded, Ed, I asked you a question, I asked the board a question about your hopes for the district, and your answer actually scared me. So I became, as my kids would say, I became scared of you. But I just want to thank both of you for your service, for the conversations that we've had over the time that we've been together. Angela, I appreciate the conversations that we've had that have been very uncomfortable when on issues of equity and pushing my thinking and my understanding from my lens. And I really appreciate it. I've learned a great deal from you in that realm, and I appreciate the work that you've led on equity, and your legacy to this district will forever be the closing of the gaps, as you just heard Jessica talking about. Ed, I know that the year that my Gracie ran elementary track, that was 3 years ago now, she still talks about that experience. And as do Wyatt and Addie, although they didn't have as much of an opportunity because they were, I think Wyatt was a year or 2 young, but we let him run anyway. Shouldn't say that publicly, huh? Your passion for students, for young children, for athletics, for physical fitness and health is your legacy to this district. And I know you've been doing that for a very long time, and certainly from your seat as a board member, you've done a great job at pushing those initiatives forward that are so important to the health and well-being of our children. So I just want to thank both of you for your leadership, your friendship, your courage through these challenging yet courageous times, and wish you both the very best.
Director Peterson, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, this is one of those public service things that you do for the community, and you two have both poured your life into Federal Way Public Schools, and the things I've learned from each of you and your time on the board. Ed, I look at your plaque here, 2001 to 2013, and that is just amazing. Your longevity and your service to this community is very commendable. And I just wish you two the best, and thank you for your service and all that you've passed on to us here, so thank you.
Director Moore.
Well, serving on the school board is a difficult job. I think it would almost be easier to be in Olympia, because when you're there, nobody ever sees the work that you do. You can do all kinds of damage that nobody ever sees, and you don't ever see anybody, so everything's okay. But when you're on the school board, you have to face the people that you're working for on a regular basis, and a lot of times, it's not fun. but it's important work. And Ed, I want to first say to you that you have been a consistent leader on the board. You have led in a quiet but powerful way, without a lot of fanfare, but you've been there consistently. I can't imagine doing anything as long as you've been on the board, and so that you are to be commended for that. You have been a steady force on the board for kids, and so I've learned a lot from you, and I take that with me. And I got you a little gift that you can open later. I'm not very good. I'm the guy who tells you what you got before you open it. So I really want you to open it, but open it later if you would. Even though I won't. All right, it's a clock. Because of all the time that you've had on the board. Angela, you and I came on the board pretty close to the same time. You have challenged me in ways that I don't know if anybody else has challenged me in the ways that you have challenged me, but we have had very nice conversations. We've had very unpleasant conversations, but in that process, I have gotten stronger. And I thank you for your passion and your service to the kids in this district. You both will be greatly missed. Thank you for how you've helped me in leadership. And while the board is changing, it will never be the same. Thank you both.
I just want to say two things. One is, Ed, when I think of you, I think of servant leadership and how important that is, and giving back to your community and never expecting anything really back in return. And you taught my kids how to run, and you taught my youngest it was okay that he ran last so everyone else wouldn't feel bad about coming in last, because he still got a ribbon in track, and that was critically important for me, for him to know that. And I think when I think of Angela, I think of a parent, and I think of an ally. And that many of you may not know, and many of you may, that Angela is a parent in the district, and I met Angela as a parent in the district who was taking part in being part of the leadership and the work, because things weren't necessarily the way we liked them to be. And is, as our role as parents, that we decide it's not only important for what's important for our children, but we've got something that we can give to other children and to other people in our community, and that's what both Angela and Ed have done over the years. And Angela, you are my ally, and you're my ally in probably the most important conversations, and I'm just going to say about race, because that's what equity is all about. And that's what inclusion's all about, and that's what the opportunity gap is all about, and given everything else, it boils down to how it is that we work together, and given the same access and opportunity, how we see what's best for all kids. And never will forget that, and even though you're not sitting up here, I do believe you will be my constant ally to remind me of the work that needs to be done, and how far we're moving the needle on making sure we're changing the future for kids. And I just want to thank both of you. And Ed, I believe you are the historian. And what we will miss is someone who's got, not living in the past, but able to give us some information and frame why we are where we are, and perhaps where we've come from and where we found ourselves today based on what was, and then helping us then be able to look forward and say, based on that, how do we want to move in the future? And I also hope that your work in the community is not done. You may not be sitting up here, but I think I heard you say before, we'll be seeing you. And I would hope that we would see both of you. If there's work to be done and you feel like we're not doing it, that you too would take your turn at the podium and share with us what your thinking is and what your thoughts are for our next moves. So thank you so much for all you've done. Yeah, you guys, you want to say first?
Please, parting words.
Speech first, and then we'll do this, okay?
I was trying to get out of here without saying anything. I wrote up several things and ripped them up, tore them up, threw them in the trash, threw them at the wall. Have a picture of Rob up on the wall. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. I am really grateful. I'm grateful to the community for electing me into this position and all of the great conversations I've had with community members and students around education and the importance of an equitable education, a high quality education, and success for all of our kids. I came onto the school board for several reasons, and you know, one, I was a parent and I was an advocate in the community, and there's a person in the back there that I'm going to call on. I actually would like for her to come forward. Her name is Therese Moore, and she was one of the people that dragged me into this role as a parent advocate. But one of the pivotal moments for me that led to me making a decision to be on the school board, and there were several, but one of the pivotal moments was I was having a conversation with someone in the school, and it was about my student. But I said, if this is happening to my student, how many other kids is this happening to in our school district, and how do we fix this on behalf of kids? And what I was told is that, you know, we're here about your kid, and that's who you need to be talking about. And so that was the pivotal moment that I said I want to be involved in a systemic way where I could talk about what's happening for all kids in our school district. And I'm really excited about some of the things that we were able to push forward during my short stint here, academic acceleration and standards-based education. The grading, something I don't know how much help I had in that, but the actual standards, setting standards for our kids so we know exactly what they're learning, they're supposed to be learning, it's been critical, and I appreciate being able to be a part of those processes. So I'm going to actually ask Therese Moore to come up because she had something she wanted to say, and I feel like I have to let her say it because she's the reason why I'm here.
Well, I thought it would be appropriate as a director that was encouraged to have parents be a part of the leadership discussions around how our district engages families. I just wanted to thank you for being on the parent leadership team about 7 years ago, and you stayed for about 3 years. Claire was on the team back 10 years ago for about 3 or 4 years, and I believe that you held me as a leader in the district accountable because you reminded me that you wanted a platform to be informed, prepared, and involved, but you also wanted to make sure that rather than trying to recommend what you might try to do or the way you would do it, you reminded me that it's important that all parents have a voice and that their voice be represented in the terms and in the platforms that they think are best. And so I appreciate you encouraging me that my role is not to speak for parents, but to give parents a platform to speak. And so I appreciate the accountability that I feel like I was able to have because of the transparency that you had as not just a parent, but someone moving up to be a decision maker for parents. So I thank you and I appreciate your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Therese. And the last thing I'll say is thank you, Rob, because we did have some really great, courageous conversations, and you were open, you know, and not a lot of people are open to some of the conversations we were able to have, and you, both of us would take those conversations and move into some real meaningful action for students, so thank you for that.
All I can say now is, Tony, you're the old man on the board. And you can't use it on me anymore. So, not only, you might even have a seniority there too. So, but 12 years has been a long time to serve. I've actually been in the district since '83. My son started school in '84, and I've been involved in the elementary track program since '85. So when you talk about running, yes, I like to run. I'm still running. I'll probably be running for many years to come, I hope. When I decided to run for my 4th term, it was about 30 days, excuse me a second, before we found out that my wife had cancer. So it's a bittersweet to be leaving the board, knowing that I enjoy the work I do, I enjoy the people. But now, for the next few months, I'll be taking care of my wife as she goes through chemo. Doctors say that everything will be fine, but you always take it with a grain of salt. I love my family dearly. I love the opportunity to serve this board, to serve the community. Granted, there have been discussions that people didn't like some of the things we did. We made a few mistakes along the way, but that's part of the process. If you want to know what you're going to look like, when I started on the board, I had a full head of hair. I've lost a few. Well, of course, Rob started with none, so I guess it... Very good. So it's been an enjoyable time, and it's been great working with you folks these last few years. We've had some changes on the board since I've been here. In fact, there's nobody who's left when I first started. In fact, very few of them even come around to voice their concerns anymore. I may be off the board, but I'll still be around. I'll still be involved with track. I'll still be involved in what's going on with kids, because that's why I got on the board to begin with, because I was doing what was right for children. And that's the challenge I leave with you as you continue to do your work, that you think first of the children. What is best for kids may not always be best for administrators and teachers, but it's what's best for kids. And that's what the whole process is. So I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think this is what they call pomp and circumstance, kind of. Here we go, ceremony. I would like to call on Judge David Larson to come forward to next administer the oath of office. And where's Judge Larson? There he is, okay. So Judge Larson will be up at the podium, and I would also at the same time like to call Director Jeffrey McAnally. Oh, I'm going to get it right. I promise you, I've been practicing. Up to the podium.
Sure. Do we have the oaths?
Excuse me?
I've got a copy. I've got a copy.
I apologize. It's when I was on the school board, you started meetings at 7, so I thought I was going to be early. You want to raise your right hands too with your dad?
Right here. Raise this hand.
You're the right hand. There you go. I, Jeffrey McAnally,
I, Jeffrey McAnally,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support and maintain the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Washington,
the Constitution of the State of Washington,
promote the interests of public education,
promote the interest of public education,
and faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of director,
and faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of director,
Director,
District Number 1
District Number 1
of the Federal Way Public School District,
of the Federal Way Public School District,
Number 210,
Number 210,
King County,
King County,
State of Washington,
State of Washington,
prescribed by law,
prescribed by law,
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Congratulations, Judge.
All right, Director Bacanella, if you'd like to come up and take your seat. Hi. I'd like to officially welcome you to the group. We are a member of 4 board members tonight, and you recall there are 5 elected members, and Carol Jeffries today was her retirement party, and before she launches in her career of school board member, she's finishing her work career, and it just so happened that tonight was the night that they had planned the big to-do for her, and it was not something that she could reschedule. So we are seating Jeffrey tonight, and at the next regular board meeting, we will be doing the same process for Director Gregory as she is seated with us, and we will then be a fully seated member of board of 5. However, we can still move forward with our work tonight because we are a quorum of 4. So, and before we move on, I would just like to ask if you'd like to introduce any special guests or family members or anyone that came with you, and if you have any comments.
Sure. So my spouse, Devin, and my 3 boys, Zach, Zane, and Zeth, are here tonight. I have several friends in the audience as well. I thank you for being here. I'm really humbled and honored that you have entrusted in me for the next 4 years the things we will do for our children. And hopefully we can look at some of the things that have been done in the past and make sure that we move forward in the best interest of every child, all 22,000 of them in the district. We have to look and make sure that we are truly providing and investing and meeting them right where they're at to give them the best opportunity to be the most successful we can. And so that's why I ran, and that's what I plan on doing going forward. I also want to make sure that teachers, educators, and building administrators have a voice at the table and make sure that they're always heard and are here, and that's part of what I ran on, and that will be a continued piece for me to make sure that we are transparent and communicating to the best of our ability, including parents. I've heard it clearly from the community over the last few months that we need to be transparent, and so as a board we need to look at some things maybe differently, and hopefully with Carol and I being new directors we can bring some different insight, a different lens to look at, and possibly perhaps make sure that we have a complete partnership with our community, our educators, and everybody involved taking care of our 22,000 students. So thank you very much.
All right. Welcome. So the next up on the agenda is a board election of officers. And so I would first ask for nominations for president. Are there any nominations for president?
Madam President, I nominate Director Peterson for the position of president.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll accept.
Are there any nominations for president? Are there any nominations for president? There's a nomination been made, been seconded. Any discussion? Having no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Director Peterson being president, say aye.
Aye.
I'll take a voice vote, please. Director McAnalloy,
Aye.
Director Moore,
Aye.
Director Peterson,
Aye.
Director Wilson, abstain. 3 votes, 1 abstention. Motion carries. I would now like to have President assume the seat, and then we'll move forward with the rest of the elections.
Just want to thank the board at this time. I'm honored to be able to serve as president and look forward to serving our great district moving forward. At this time, I'd like to call for nominations for vice president.
Mr. President, I would like to nominate a new member to the board who I believe has done a great bit of homework in preparing to serve on the board. I have met with him on 2 occasions and believe that he will do an outstanding job. I think he will provide a fresh voice on the board, and I'm excited to see his contribution on a leadership level. And at this time, I would nominate Gregory McAnalloy for vice president.
Director McAnalloy, do you accept?
I accept.
Are there any other nominations for vice president? Are there any other? Do I have a second? I'll second. Are there any other nominations for vice president? Are there any other nominations for vice president? This time I'd like to call for a roll call vote. I'd like to ask Ms. Poppich if she could please take a roll call vote for us. Are you able to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Abstain.
Director Moore,
Aye.
Director McAnalloy,
Aye.
President Peterson,
Aye. The results are?
1 abstention and 3 for.
Thank you. I would like to announce that Director McAnalloy is elected Vice President as a result of the roll call vote. At this time, I'd like to call for nominations for Legislative Representative. Are there any nominations for Legislative Representative?
So at this time, President Peterson, I'd like to make a motion that we actually suspend the movement of the legislative liaison until January when we have all 5 of us present.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a second. Motion on the floor is to suspend the nomination for Legislative Representative. All in favor? Actually, I'm going to ask for discussion. Is there discussion on that? Okay, at this time, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 3 votes and 1 abstention. 3 yeses and 1 abstention. At this time, I would like to make a motion for the reaffirmation of policies. Is there a motion that can be put on the floor?
Mr. President, I move that all policies and adapted regulations are in full force and effect as they are now constituted, but are subject to individual review and revision as needed and as need arises.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute recess.
I think you and I are a lot closer when we even remotely think. Even if we come at a different place. Yeah, even if we come at a different place. Well, I even think on the other front, I even think the Democrat Republican piece, you and I are not as far apart as we could be. Because nobody's as far in any direction as, and we're constantly moving and growing. I know I am. I know I've held positions in the past that have been wrong. And I'm not afraid to say so. I was wrong on gay marriage. Because I took it to part of I was wrong. And I changed. So I hope that those aren't barriers that keep us from going. I hope you'll introduce me to your spouse. That would be I would love that. Now we need to work on
That's exactly, and I think last time we met, we could have it being here.
And I just want to thank you.
Thank you. How are you doing? Good. How's Pikeman treating you? Yeah. How did that go? Is it going? Good. Nice setup there. My doctor here in the woods. Texas. Cool. What are we gonna told? It's going to change the priority standard. Yeah, basically what'll happen is we're going to do...
Is this where you are? Is there a name right there? Okay.
We're going to do...
I'm going to give you a couple things. Just let you know, Denise, you asked for that a while ago. There it is. And this, you get this, and you get that. And then you can use that. I get the black folder at the end of the night.
Okay.
Is this
Good to
yours?
see you. Yeah.
Okay.
2 years.
Thanks. Congratulations.
Terry there today. Cool. Thanks for coming and saying hi. Yeah, definitely. I'll get you up so you can share. Well, sir. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's all different. All right. Take care. Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm in the wrong seat. It's his seat. Sounds good. This time I'd like to reconvene our board meeting. Invite the directors that are out in the audience to please return to their seat. And at this time I'd like to invite to the podium our grade recommendations from Superintendent Rob New and whoever else he has presented today.
Thank you, President Peterson, directors, and members of the audience. And Ron Mayberry is going to join me again. the same format that we followed last week. And so tonight, and I guess I'll drop back to 2 weeks ago just to remind the board and the audience that the board approved a change to the calculation of the grading policy as it relates to the calculation of the assessment and assignment level and the determination of a priority standard score. So tonight, we're going to take the next step in recommendations upon further input, conversation, a work study, several meetings with students, and the opportunity to meet with staff over the last 2 weeks. So with that, Ron, if you'd go to the next slide, please. Same guiding principles that we presented last week, that we are committed to grading on the standards and students' academic achievement using a 4-point scale. Clear and understandable communication and making sure that students understand clearly where they're at in their academic progress, and that in the end, teacher judgment prevails. So with that, Ron's going to take you through a series of data slides that we've compiled over the last 2 weeks.
All right, so this slide of data represents, on the far right, under power law and conditional, the data that was in our system from our 9 weeks marking period in time. So it was 11/4, November 4th. And across the bottom, when we converted to averaging in our test system, these are the changes that took place. So if we're looking across, we see the number in yellow there, 11,523. That number represents where the A's coincide between the two calculation systems. So in changing from power law and conditional matrix to averaging and averaging across the top, we see that, and this is, by the way, this data also represents the summary of all 4 comprehensive high schools. That's important. That's why there's 39,000 records there. In that A intersection, though, that's our 11,523 place that it agrees with itself. So under averaging and averaging, it would be an A. Under power law and conditional, it was an A. And as we move to the right in that same column, we see of those original 12,168 power law conditional matrix A's, 641 of them will become B's, 4 of them will become C's. And we can, as we look down the rows, now we're looking at the B column, we see that there were 4,564 B's, both under averaging and the former. And 913 of them will become A's, 556 will reduce to C's, 70 of them will become F's. C's, we see the same type of trend, 4108, with 3,515 becoming B's. So you'll notice that the B column is growing under averaging and averaging. F column, so as we look at the actual comparisons, the important factor is we had 12,168 A's. Under averaging, we actually have 13,306 A's. We had 6,100 B's. We will have 9,469 B's. C's actually go down a bit. That's because many of them move to the B column. And then our F's go down from 11,962 F's to 9,216. These represent a variety of students at all 4 comprehensive high schools. So looking at that same data in a column there, pardon me?
I'm gonna jump in.
You want me to go back?
No, you're fine. I just wanted to interject, because I failed to do so, that part of the process that we were looking at over the last 2 weeks was different options that we could go to as we reviewed the conditional matrix. Obviously, the option A would be to keep the matrix the same. Second option was option B, if you will, would be to move to the matrix with modifications, especially addressing the impact of 1-1 that it has on an F grade. And then the other options we're looking at going to an averaging of the priority standard, which the board approved last board meeting, and then now taking that priority standard grade to an average for the calculation of a final grade. And so at this point, that's what Mr. Mayberry is presenting, is that average of the priority standard into average of the assessments into a priority standard, and then averaging of the priority standards into a final grade.
Yeah. And so from this sheet, we take this data just into this, just to give you a graphical look at that same data. So again, the darker column being power law and conditional matrix, that's our current system as it stands. Again, we're looking at all 4 comprehensive high schools, and we're looking at 9-week marking period data here. So we see that in the A column, the B column, we have growth in those areas, so more kids getting more Bs and As. We see the Cs decline some, and we see the Fs decline significantly too. So then we wanted to make sure, as we talked about last meeting, we wanted to see if within ethnicity categories, and we're using the 7 federal categories here, if there were any differences through ethnicity. And we see a very similar impact. The decreases range from 3.1 to 4.5 are increased grades, in other words, grades going from B to A or C to B, all range in that 14.6 to 16.2. So very similar in all ethnic categories. We also were asked about gender. I didn't have data on that last meeting, so I wanted to make sure we had that into this meeting. This table looks at two categories. So our A column is looking at our male students during our conditional matrix and power law, and the second column for the males is looking at if we were averaging and averaging, and then beside that are the female scores in that darker blue. And again, we see the same growth, same ratio of growth, both in the A column, the B columns, and the C columns, and including the Fs as they go down. Very little difference in relationship to gender. We also wanted to look a little at middle school credit-bearing courses. So this data represents our 7 middle schools, and you see that between power law and conditional matrix and our averaging and averaging, again, very little differences, with the exception of, and these are in the credit-bearing middle school classes, so these are our math classes and world languages that take place in our middle schools. And so we see a decline in the number of Fs and an increase in Cs, and very little difference between our As and Bs at our middle school level. In our middle school non-credit-bearing classes, these are the ones that carry the BAME, beginning, approaching, meeting, exceeding categories. And again, we see similar differences as we saw in our ABC and F. I think that represents a pretty consistent instructional approach by our middle schools, and that we see the same data in both BAME and ABC.
So at the last board meeting, the board approved using averaging at the assignment assessment level to calculate a recommendation to the teacher who would then determine a priority standard grade. This slide describes what basically what meeting standard, not meeting standard means. We're on a 4-point scale at the assessment assignment level, and this is what's confusing to people, is that a 1, 2, 3, 4 is not equivalent to an FD or FCBA, for that matter, ABCF. So basically, a 1 and a 2 are not meeting standard, and in last year's grade book, that would have been a no or a 0. Last year, parents asked that we provide more specificity. The word of the most recent couple weeks has been granularity. And so we went to a 4-point scale, like we do with BAME, to bring more clarity to, is my student, what is my student? Is a no not even close? Is he getting close? Or is a meeting, did he get it? Or did she exceed standard or excel? And so again, the 1, 2 is the equivalent of a binary 0. The 3, 4 is the equivalent of a binary 1. So with that, the board did approve to going to averaging and producing a priority standard score that will be to the first decimal. So for instance, the average of assignments and assessments may accumulate to a 3.2 at the priority standard level, and then those 3.2s and 2.8s and 3.6s get averaged across into a final grade. So with that, my recommendation to the board at this time is to average the priority standards into the final grade. So here's the trick. Once again, that 1, 2, 3, 4 of the assignment assessment level is a 1, 2 not meeting, a 3, 4 meeting. So with that, what you see up here on the screen, I know it's really small for you folks in the audience, but an A grade now, if approved by the board, would be the average score of priority standards of 3.5 to a 4.0. A B score of the priority standards would be a 3.0 to a 3.49, and a C score would be a 2.3 to a 2.99. And the key thing to really focus in on is that lower range of the two score, of the C score. To make it a 2.0 would mean that a student could get 10 2s and pass with a C and not meet any standard. So we tried to, we didn't try, we studied the data and worked at determining a cut. We looked from a 2.2 to a 2.5 on where that C range would start. We had recommendations from proposals from students and parents that really kind of came in around that 2.2, 2.3 range. And as we looked at the data, we felt that the 2.3 was a fair range to start us out at. So my recommendation to the board, and you have in front of you a new version, and it's a draft, of grading and reporting policy 2420. And so at this time, I know we're ready to move to public comment, but does the board have any clarifying questions before we move to public comment on my recommendation?
Any questions or comments from the board?
I think the only comment that I would like to have clarity on, a question I guess, is that this is a first step, that there's more conversations.
You actually just hit the perfect segue into Vince Blauser, who's going to present your next steps. I actually misspoke, and I apologize for that. So thank you for that, Director Moore. And if you want, we can have Vince go ahead with next steps and then come back to those questions. I apologize. Thank you, Vince. I had a big note here to say Vince.
I saw you look back at me. Thank you. Well, good evening, members of the board. I met with all secondary principals over 2 full days recently to work out not only the details of the next step, but to confirm their collective commitment to seeing plans through, and I'm confident to say I got both. Following the recent board work study, where parents, students, and staff had an opportunity to weigh in on various topics on grading, I tried to capture the comments for the secondary in particular around various topics, and then I divided them into 3 categories: policy 2420, classroom practices, and communication. The principals and I then devised next steps, which I'll address tonight, in those areas of concern. Oh, just what I want to do. There we go. Here are the comments related to policy 2420, and I apologize if they're small for the audience. You have a copy of this in your handout, and there are pictures of the originals on our district website. Some of these consistency across the district at grade level departments with the homework policy. There's a lot here about matrix and averaging, managing the number of standards in the class. And these are under policy 2420. The next are comments related to classroom practices, where the public had asked us to look at overrides, and what the gradebook showed really doesn't mean anything was a comment. Looking at assessments and the weighted assessments, raw scores, and things of the like. Can't look through those. Here's captured the comments related to communication. The grading is too complicated right now, that everybody wants clarity. You know, what about grades affecting seniors? From this input, the principals and I have been working on a very detailed and transparent communication plan, starting with a staff meeting tomorrow morning at every secondary school geared towards addressing the transition issues. Of course, this is pending the outcome of your vote this evening. If you vote to adopt the superintendent's recommendation, the first item on the agenda with staff is to communicate the changes to the grading system. Then secondary administrators will unveil a plan for a building-wide information session for students on grading calculations and how grades are determined. In addition, each secondary principal has recommitted to the board's expectation that grades will be entered into the grade book in a timely manner to communicate current levels of progress to parents. Next week, all 4 comprehensive high schools will hold a forum at the respected schools on December 19th at 6:30 p.m. in their library to talk specifically about the adjusted grading policy. If this date doesn't work for individuals, we'll have a make-up date in January. We will also assure that you will have written and online materials explaining and supporting the new grading policy, and will be updated as soon as possible. We'll get right on that. On or before January 6th, right in there, 2014, we will be sending a letter home explaining the new grading system. In this letter will be a table like this example to show a comparison of an individual student's old grade calculations against the new calculation grade. In the first column on the left will be the course names of the classes the student is currently taking. In the second column, the column displays the student's overall grade as calculated by the grading system on November 11th. That was the first marking period using both power law and conditional matrix for all courses, as well as teacher overrides in this column. This was the grade that was sent home for the first marking period in the progress report in November. In the third column, we'll show parents what the marking period snapshot looks like now using averaging at the assignment level and the assessment level and for the overall grade. And then the last column, this shows the new overall calculated grade up to whenever we flip the switch, hopefully before January 6th. This score will represent the current grade in the system as calculated by averaging at the assessment and assignment level and overall grade. The letter will have a very detailed description for each one of these columns, explaining the comparison between the old and the new grading system. We felt that this was valuable for parents to see the new and old grading system side by side. And each student will receive this information and mailed home in multiple languages. If averaging is agreed upon in the overall grade level, so what happens if grades drop to F in the new grading calculation? Now, we understand that this is a possibility, and we'll make every effort to address those deficiencies. And our plan is to pull reports so that teachers can verify grades. We're going to help teachers identify those students who have grades that drop to F, and we're going to call them in and go to work. We'll combine the efforts of teachers, counselors, administrators, intervention specialists at middle schools, academic coaches, and parents to team up to intervene for the appropriate plan of intervention with their students. We're going to use extended learning opportunities. We'll look at reassessment and retakes, or really all the intervention programs that are currently in place now to support students. And we'll do a one-time additional compensation for teachers to monitor all the new grades and the changes, focusing primarily on the students that are now currently in the EF column. At our recent principal meeting, we have reevaluated our non-negotiables around reassessments and retakes in the classroom. As a result, principals will immediately work with staff to implement the non-negotiables for reassessment and for retakes. This procedure will be posted on their website. And the non-negotiables will include a statement, and this will be district-wide, and I think it's important that I read these. Grades should be a reflection of student learning and recognize that individual students learn at different rates and in different ways. Any assessment or assignment that is evaluated for proficiency of one or more standards can be used to determine a student's grade. Any assignment given for practice or completion will not be used to determine a student's grade, but may be entered into the grade book for communication. Students will have multiple opportunities to achieve mastery of a priority standard. Multiple opportunities fall into two categories: additional assessments, which happen as part of the curriculum, and retakes of a particular assignment or assessment. Okay. Teachers may set timelines for initial retakes. A student must demonstrate further learning and readiness prior to the retakes, which is really a key piece. And retakes will be worth the same score as the original assessment or assignment. These will be statements non-negotiable district-wide. So our transition expectations are, with your approval of this vote, grades will be recalculated using a new method on December 13th, averaging at both the assignment and priority standard level. Grades will be recalculated from the beginning of the marking period 1 to current date using the new calculations. A letter will be sent home communicating the grade comparisons from the old grading system to the new grading system, as was shown earlier. A new cut score will be applied to the overall letter grade, and communication plans for teachers, students, and parents will immediately go into effect. As we look forward in this work, we understand that there are other areas around grading that are worthy of further discussion. Superintendent New has asked for an advisory council to be formed consisting of parents, students, teachers, and administrators to meet on a regular basis to examine the considerations of some of the possible topics listed here, some of which were raised at the recent board work study, with the understanding that we will continue to audit our current practices, review our ongoing results, and adjust where needed to meet the needs of all students. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Ron Mayberry to come back up and walk through the calculation system will look like on the previous slide deck. And Mr. Blauser, if you could stay by the podium for board questions. But
yeah.
I also want to explain, because I heard very clearly from the work study and subsequent conversations the desire to implement weighted grades, pluses and minuses to the final grades, and to incorporate more granularity at the assignment assessment level. Predominantly, the recommendation or request was 0.5 scale, so 0.5, a 1, 1.52, and up to a 4.0 on the assessment assignment level. Understand that those things aren't being incorporated into this proposal, but those are conversations that we must continue to have moving forward. And we will continue to make adjustments going forward, not this year with approval of the board's recommendation tonight, this recommendation of the board tonight. There are going to be, not only are there going to be grade changes to students, but there are certain places in the curriculum and in the district where instruction is occurring that these changes are going to wreak havoc. And it's going to be some work getting people, teachers, and the curriculum aligned to this adjustment that I'm proposing tonight. Implementing further changes, such as the weighted grades plus minus, the half-point increments, or what I would like to really have a conversation about is taking the averaging and applying conditional statements to those. That was actually a recommendation that came out of some TJ teachers a week and a half ago. So, for instance, as you see up there, an A is a 3.5 and a 4.0, but you cannot have more than 10% ones or twos. I'm just making that up. It's a hypothetical. But those are the conversations that we have to have moving forward, as well as weighted grades, pluses and minuses, and the half-point increments, and whatever else we have moving forward. But understand that this change is going to create a challenge. We're going to flip the switch with approval Friday. System's going to be down over the weekend. Monday, you'll wake up to new grades. And then the process will begin that Mr. Blauser and the principals have worked diligently to put together. So with that, Mr. Mayberry, would you please show the calculation method and how it works?
Absolutely. So in an effort to illustrate how this works, these boxes here just represent assignments, and each of the columns are different priority standards. And as of 2 weeks ago, our recommendation by the board was to apply averaging at the priority standard level. And based on that, we would see these kind of calculations. Our grading system, our grade software, uses a calculation out to the 100th place. So I've represented that with 3.50, 2.66, 3.50, 2.33, and 1.00. Next step would be to average those across. So if you average those 5 numbers, you're going to come up with 2.60. Could be a fractional again out to the 100th place. That's why in Mr. New's recommendation, you've seen the 100th place play a role in that recommendation. So this is how our cut scores were agreed upon, using 2.3 as our bottom number for a passing grade. So 2.3 to 2.99 is our C in approaching. Our 3.00 to 3.49 is our B in meeting, and 3.5 to 4.0 A in excelling. And so based on our current application and this recommendation, that particular 2.6 would equal a C or approaching.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any further comments or questions from board members? I would just like to say that obviously there's greater clarity here, and obviously moving forward with the next steps, we want to see consistency across the district. And so I'm glad that we're looking forward to that and how to do that and where we might have places that we need to give more attention to. So thank you.
Mr. President, I move that the board adopt the new grading system as submitted by the superintendent.
Public comment.
I'm going to go ahead
We're
and
gonna
I'm going to hold off on that. What we're going to do right now is
Oh.
we're going to move
Let them
to
respond.
public comment, and then we'll have a motion for the board at that time.
Is after that.
No, public comment right here. We're doing two. Oh, yeah, I got you. So all the directors are on the same page now. We will now at this time open up the microphone for public comment. I'd like to remind all of you that are here tonight, this is maybe your first time. 3 minutes is allowed for comment, and what we do over there at the podium is we have the light system there. When it goes yellow, that means you need to begin wrapping up. Obviously, when it hits red, we'd like you to wrap up whatever last sentences you're saying there and complete your comment at that time. So at this time, I'd like to invite Tamara Armstrong, and if I could have on deck what we've done the last couple of weeks, just have the two next people ready to go. That way, just for time's sake, we're all ready to go. So we'll have Tamara Armstrong come to the podium. Then we'd like to have Angela Worcester also be on deck, and also Michael Scuderi. So this time, Tamara, would you?
Hi. I was actually going to discuss the matrix, but now that that's been presented to the board, I might not have a question yet. Perhaps at the next meeting. So since I have a couple minutes here, I want to readdress the issue with the Cambridge pre-ACE exams. Mr. New? Because last time you directed your eyes on me and said they were not being taken away, but it's my understanding they are. And I'm wondering what the status is of that.
I'm under the impression, and talking with Mr. Blauser since the last meeting and Mr. Luttrell, that there was a building level decision to reduce 4 tests, but I believe that those tests are being accommodated. And so, Mr. Blauser, if you could please answer that question.
Yes, the decision last year was to reduce the number of tests at the 9th and 10th grade level, primarily because the number of tests that were issued in March was just overwhelming. But we are hearing that there is enough of a need to maybe negotiate that back in terms of maybe looking at other alternatives for kids who want to take those tests to sign up. And I know that parents are working with Mr. Luttrell to reinstate those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to invite Angela Worcester up to the front, please. Thank you. Worcester. There you go.
Like a book. Thank you for hearing us out tonight. I need to thank many of you for listening to both my husband and I share many opinions and perspectives over the last 6 weeks. I appreciate your time. I appreciate that the superintendent has made a proposal. And I'm going to ask you to be courageous and take your time. Tonight you can end with just approving this motion verbatim. You could possibly make a motion that would include acknowledging the fact that this proposal has just been presented to us, and you're asked to us, meaning the public, the true owners of federally public schools, and being asked that this be the last change. I'd appreciate it if you'd consider a motion that might add some language that you acknowledge the purpose of it tonight to make it possible for teachers and students to work towards their grades, but not that it be the end all this year. If something within this year still comes up, if you can somehow add that language. I didn't know what the proposal was, so I couldn't prepare myself very well this evening. Again, I'd also encourage you to be courageous in thinking about your own policy of governance, and to possibly seek at your earliest opportunity to amend one of your policies under Academic Program Standards and Practices, EL-13. The policy currently reads that the superintendent shall not fail to adopt and develop a rigorous standards-based academic program that enables all students to achieve the board's ends policy. Accordingly, the superintendent may not. There's 5 different points, 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5 being fail to recommend and implement a standards-based grading and reporting system. Full stop. And I would ask that you would consider revising that to give yourself some more revise it in a way that asks the superintendent to meet criteria before implementation of a grading system, not just be given total authority to propose it and be the only expert, but to ask for some more conditions to be met before implementation. We often hear that grading systems are research-based. I have full confidence that the superintendent will always bring that to the table. The public's not always so sure that they are built upon systems that produce successful results district-wide in other school districts with similar demographics. That's been questioned. And we'd like it to be complemented by training for teachers who can become experts before implementation. And that is widely accepted by the public as helping teachers to hold students accountable while also communicating learning grades and academic expectations, and widely accepted by the public as producing fair and reputable grade points. If it's a consideration I would ask you to think about, and thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you. This time I'd like to invite Michael Scuderi, and we'll have on deck, we'll have Shelley Scuderi and Hoon Her.
Let's see. I don't even know if I need to do my PowerPoint this time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you also for listening. I think we see some congruence between what was said at the work study and what the proposal is. Not perfect. I would again ask that you reconsider about granularity as you're making this decision at both the assessment level and at the grade level versus what's been proposed. Also, one other clarification, one other question to ask that we have is basically with the Bain scale, what are the cutoffs there? Is it the same, or is it 4.0 to 3.5 is a exceeding, 3.5 to 3.0 is a passing? Is that the scale? That wasn't clear in the presentation.
It's the same, yeah. We had it up there. It was a brief slide.
Okay, so it's the same.
2.3, 3.0, and 3.5.
Okay. That's all I have for today. It's nice to be short for once.
Thank you.
Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Yours is this one here. And let's go to full screen. Okay, let's click the.
A little bit of history with standards-based grading in the district. There was a pilot at TJ in 2010-2011. In May of 2011, there was a district forum on standards-based grading with 50 TJ parents voicing serious concerns about the piloted grading system. And at that point, it was to no avail. We thank you that you're finally listening years later. Mr. New and the board were in attendance at that meeting. Mr. Moore was the only current board member who was in attendance. So some of us have had 4 grading systems in 4 years, and some of us have had 3. Some of the changes that were consensus from the work study you've already reviewed: increased granularity, weighted averaging on assessments, transparency, improved communication, and consistency in retakes. Parents asked who was using our grading system. These were the school districts that we were provided with that were using our grading system. Lake Washington is the only local one in the state of Washington here. They have had implementation issues as well and have some major differences. The Kenosha School District in Wisconsin and Lake Washington are only using the power law at the elementary, not at the secondary level. And in fact, an official from Lake Washington asked, why aren't we piloting it? In Scottsdale, the parents are expressing concern about homework weighting, something that's been expressed here. In Redmond and Oregon, only a few teachers are piloting a standards view. It's recommended to teachers to use a mean or an aggregate and not the power law. In the Quaker Valley School District in Pennsylvania, they're using percentages to calculate class grades and have a much finer delineation or granularity, something we've asked for. The Poland Regional High School in Maine does use the power law and averaging scores, but they only have 475 students at one high school, so I don't know that that's really a good comparison. Beaverton has some problems as well. Their board is recognizing that the system is not clear, understandable, accessible, all things we're complaining about. Further things that we're complaining about, that if we have to have a decoding method to understand it, something's wrong. Huge concern about how they're overloading teachers. So we're not alone with our concerns. Other districts have seen the need to start out gradually. Other districts have had to respond to community concerns and alter the process. And again, we thank you for doing that. The Federal Way community is not unique in asking you to proceed with caution. You need to make changes to the current system now, including the power law and the matrix. By increasing granularity, retake policies need to be addressed in weighted assessments. You need to competently research and investigate possible future alternatives, and we beg you to please pilot a system incrementally, transparently evaluate the results, increase the pilot sites with more evaluation until all partners are satisfied. Then and only then should you be moving forward with a new grading system. And finally, I'd like to get further clarification on that BAME approaching and the C grade. It sounds like both of them are 2.6. Is that correct? You can get a 2.6 and get a C grade. Is that correct?
The C grade and approaching are both 2.3 to 2.99. A B grade and meeting are 3.0 to 3.49. And excelling and is it exceeding? Exceeding for BAME? Both excelling are 3.5 to 4.0.
So the approaching and the C grade are the same?
Same,
Okay.
same band.
But when you look at a high school transcript, the C grade is passing, correct?
Yes.
But when you look at a BAME, approaching really isn't passing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's the challenge of, and that's why we had Mr. Mayberry show that 4-point scale on the standard scale, then get converted through the averaging of the priority standards into a grade point average scale. And so that's why the cut scored at 2.3. Otherwise, we'd be at 2.0 if they matched up evenly.
But it seems like there's some inconsistency there where you've got a score in a middle school that's approaching and it's not passing the class, and a C score at a high school bearing credit class that's passing. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure that it does, or I don't understand.
You've got the
We
same
lined them
numbers.
up. We lined them up to be the same, so that we would have a smooth transition for the students moving forward, from middle school to high school, with the idea that 2.0 or C, well, 2.0 is not a meeting, or 2 on an assignment assessment level is not a meeting grade. So we actually increased the rigor slightly for the middle school students to align with the high school students. Does that make sense?
I'm going to have to email you on this because
Okay.
I think you've got approaching in the C with the same numbers. And you've got one at high school that's passing and one at middle school that means they're failing. And they're using the same numbers?
And,
Is that, I don't
and
know.
at this time, I'm just going to thank you for your comment. We're going to go ahead and move on with June Herr. And I'd like to have Charles Hoff and Leah Gillis be on deck, please. So, thank you.
Okay, hello, my name is Jun Herr, and I go to Thomas Jefferson High School. I'm a junior, and I came here to talk about priority center, which is basically priority center versus the average rate centers. And so currently people kind of think like the priority center like drops the grade drastically when you get a single one at the very end, but I kind of did the research about it, and when in the old priority center, when you had a 1, 1, 4, which is 1 getting at the very first and 4 getting at the very last, they give you a 4, but currently they kind of changed the priority center because they thought that the changing, which the exponential change is very steep, so they changed that into a 2. So if you have a 1, 1, 4, you get a 2. And in other words, if you have a 4, 1, 1, which you get a 4 and a 1 at the end. And last time you guys had it, it was supposed to be a 1 because it shows you exponential decay, which is it drops down drastically. But currently it's a 2. So when they said that the current priority standard shows a kind of a drastic change, and they want to change the average system because they drastically increases the amount of people that's going to pass or get an A. But I kind of doubt the situation that's going to be like that, because currently we're only at the midterm and we still have 5 more weeks to deal with all the grade stuff. And the priority standard, the fundamental is that you kind of check how the people's going to grow. For example, like, so no, for not example, for like, okay, for example, so we say we have a 2 essay, and one of the essay, 2 of the essay you're going to grade about grammar, and let's say first time you get a 3, but if you get a 3 at the first time, or let's say that you get a 2, at the worst case you get a 2 because your grammar is not sufficient. the reason why the grading, the board member changed it to the priority standard because if they do the average system where they grade the whole entire grade holistically, they can't really find out where the students are really weak or strong at. So they change it to a specific priority standard where you can actually like attack and you can actually try to learn where the student is bad at or good at and try to improve that. But let's say if you change that to an average system where if a person get a 2 at the beginning, that means that unless the person or the student gets a straight 4s 3 times, they'll still get a B because it just basically averages out the whole entire priority standard. And I believe that averaging out the priority standard is not a really sufficient way of grading the priority standard because as you go on continuously, let's say that you make a few mistakes and you get a 3 or 2, it drastically kind of changes the average. So let's say that if someone wants to get an A, then it's really hard to get a B unless they get a straight 4s. Or if someone wants to really get a B, but if they get a 1-2 or 1-1 somehow, it's really hard to get a B back because it's really hard to average out. However, the priority standard kind of shows your growth, and if say that you're improving, that it will give you an A, B, and A. Like for example, let's say that you get a 2, 3, 4s in a line, it's going to be a 3 because you still haven't really shown the improvement. But if you say that you get a 2, 3, 4, 4, it will give you a 4 because you showed your improvement. But in the average grading system, it will show you a 3.5, which is barely an A, and it's not going to really show, it's going to drop down if you get a 3 or 2 again. And I hope that the priority standard grading will remain a little bit longer until the first semester so that we can actually get a we can actually get an accurate value of it, because currently we're only at the midterm, and I think we should implement more grades in there. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just throwing this out there. I'm from Alabama. I will never be able to talk that fast, but hopefully I can say what I need to say here. Okay, I just want to thank you guys for having the work study, and it sounds like you're listening to many of the things that we had to say. I hope that you can understand the frustration whenever we're up here trying to talk to you. You can't talk back. There's not a conversation. We'd go to the meetings on the grade book, and we kept being told now's not the appropriate time, come here, and it just seemed like forever until we could actually have a conversation. So I hope that y'all understand our frustration and know that this is a lot for us to absorb as well. One of the things that I was really glad to see that you addressed is the retake policy, and not whether or not just that you can have it or not have it, but getting some consistency across, not just across the district, but within a school and, in classrooms. And so I appreciate that you guys are looking at that. The one thing that I would like to say, and I've heard other people say it too, I haven't just heard my own students say it, is that the only way you can take a retake is if you fail. And I think that that is unfair to the students that study really hard and maybe they missed something on the test to where they made a 3. Well, they don't get that opportunity to retake to try to get the 4. So I think number one, they don't have a chance of getting a better grade, but also if what we really want our students to do is to learn the material, I mean that's what this really it should be about, then if we encourage them, all students, if you're going to allow a retake, then if we encourage all of them to do that, or at least allow all of them to do that, then maybe that student that made the 3 will go back and learn the material and make it 4. Or if they made the 2 and they know, okay, well, it'll average out, it's not a big deal, but if they know that they can go and redo it, then they will try harder for that other grade. So I just hope that whenever you discuss this and you talk about whether or not to allow retakes, that if the teachers are going to allow it, if they allow anyone in the class, then they allow all students to do it. And I think that that's in the best interest, not just for their grades, but for their learning as well. So thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll have Mr. Hoff take the podium, and Jawad Ali and Rick Weir are on deck, please.
I thought the previous conversation was being conducted by the IRS. So complicated that you've made this. I came out to the state of Washington at the invitation of the Boeing Company to help them in the training of pilots. Now imagine for a moment a trip that one might take as a pilot, let's say from Alaska Airlines and flying to Newark. Now if I get in the airplane, I know how to start the airplane. I know how to steer it on the ground because it isn't steered with a steering wheel. I know how to listen to the traffic controllers, the tower, the approach, ground control. And I fly it the whole way to Newark, and I land the airplane in Newark, but I forgot to put the landing gear down. Now I did reach over and grab the landing gear handle, but I just didn't put it down. So on an average, I'd made 10,000 decisions and only made one wrong. So when you start averaging things like this, that's the kind of situations you may get yourself into. Now, if I did that and landed the airplane on the belly, since I have a 99% and I have an approaching standard on the one that I missed, should I be able to get in the next airplane the next day and fly back to Seattle? I don't think so. So if you have these standards, then standards either have to be met or they're not met. If they're not met, then probably you shouldn't be passing the student. Now you have over 3,000 students that either failed the end of course assessment in algebra or geometry or biology last year. Those numbers don't seem to show up here. And those are just state standards. This district likes to think that it has higher standards than the state. So there's some kind of a disconnect here between what's passing and what's not passing. You have 1,800 kids that didn't meet the standard for first year algebra or first year mathematics, end of course assessment last year. That kind of stuff isn't showing up here. There's a disconnect here between what is passing and what is not passing, and what is going to work and what isn't going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll have Jawad Ali.
Hi, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone on the school board for their patience and responsiveness regarding the grading system. I know it's been really stressful for you all. That being said, I recommend the board approves Mr. New's proposal to average priority standards. Since all standards will be weighed equally, this will result in a grading model that's not only more representative of students' comprehension of class topics, but also allows students, teachers, and parents to have a more clear understanding of what these grades actually mean and how they're calculated. Since this is, of course, the primary purpose of a grading system, I feel that it'll alleviate a lot of the concerns people have been having with the grading system this year. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally tonight, for public comment on grading, we have Rick Weir.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to step away from grading for just a second and look at what I think is a bigger issue. I want the very best for the students. One day I want the district to be held up as an example of the state and even the nation as one of the best school districts. I want employers and universities to be begging us to send their students to them. The problem is I don't trust that's what you want. We need change, but change that is measured, predictable, and achieves the desired outcomes. But for you to be successful with these changes, trust and community support must be restored. Citizens of Federal Way School District contribute more than $200 million annually towards the education of our children. In addition, the substantial investment, the values of our homes, quality of our community, the success of our businesses, and the future of our children are all dependent on the district's results. The school board and the district administration have recently made a series of decisions that have greatly undermined community support. These decisions include multiple trips around the world, 4 poorly implemented grading systems, and a $42,000 raise for the superintendent. In order to restore community support for the district and, more importantly, improve educational outcomes, we insist that the following power standards be applied to the school board. Number 1, stop guessing. Stick to strategies that have been proven in the classroom. Build upon practical systems and programs in similar school districts demonstrating results that endure over time. Link every policy decision and budget expenditure directly to defined, deliberate goals. We want the administration whose primary goal is educating our children, not traveling the world and padding their own resumes with the latest buzzwords in education. Number 2, provide transparency with clear accountability. The success of every initiative requires a clear timeline with logical milestones, quantifiable measures, and designated accountability. This information should be readily available on the district's website. Power standard number 3, support what works. Programs that work should be expanded, not limited by lottery enrollments or restricted budgets. Parents and students should be proactively encouraged to participate in programs that are working. And power standard number 4, empower stakeholders. Involvement by students, parents, teachers, business owners, and taxpayers must be solicited in accordance with established timelines and well in advance of implementation of new or revised district program or policy. This must include incremental rollouts, extensive testing, regular feedback, open forum, and dialogue, and ongoing monitoring of results. We request the school board immediately adopt these power standards as governing principles for district administration. Every proposal to the board and/or announcement to the community should address each of these 4 power standards. These power standards may be the district's only hope for restoring community confidence. Failure to adopt and implement these power standards risks further community alienation, which could result in the failure of the district's upcoming $53 million operating levy. And these power standards, and as well as some other resources designed to bring about change in the district, are available at a website, fwschools.org. Again, that's fwschools.org. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one late submission. Jason Brown would like to make public comment on grading.
Thanks, Director President Peterson. I didn't see that there was 2 separate, so should I save my other comments for come back up again?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do, again, I'm Jason Brown. I'm a parent, Enterprise Elementary, and I'm also the president of the Federal Education Association. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the work study at Federal Way High School. Very well attended, and the feedback we received from our members was nothing but positive. People felt listened to. They liked the format. Some people just came because I asked them to, and wound up staying to the end because they found it beneficial. So thank you for that. Also wanted to thank the superintendent and his whole team. It's obvious that change needed to be made, but by listening to the comments tonight, listening to my members, nothing you can do is going to make everybody happy. I could ask 50 of my members tonight what they thought, and 25 may go one way, 25 may go the other. You are listening, and I believe what you're doing is in the best interest of kids, so I thank you for that. And the other thing I would ask is that regardless of the decision made tonight, I think folks need a break. So if we do any changes tonight, I really strongly recommend that we stick with those changes for the remainder of the year, whatever they may be, and work with those so people can get accustomed to them, students and parents know what's going on, and then talk about changes in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody that made public comment tonight on our grading. Obviously, as a board, we make the best decisions with the information we have, and it's been the last few weeks. It's been public comments like this at board meetings. It's been the work study. It's been emails, coffee, phone calls, all that kind of stuff. That's really the discussion has been rich, and we appreciate your feedback. And it's I know it's been. I commend the district staff for all their work, and obviously you in the community that have just been tireless as well, helping us come to where we're at tonight. So at this moment, we're going to move on to board action on grading. And I know we have a motion. Is there anybody on the board that would like to put forward a motion tonight on the grading system?
President Peterson, I'd like to move that we adopt the new grading system as submitted by Superintendent New.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any board discussion on it?
President Peterson, I think, as it was clearly stated, there's more work that needs to be done. I'm sure of that. I want to thank the young man who came and spoke about the grading. I know you were nervous, and you did a great job. And so thank you for your comments. I had an opportunity to speak with a majority of the high school principals today, and Superintendent knew they were believed that the recommendation that you have presented tonight is a good step. And while I hold reservation on the gaps in kids' learning, I know that there's work we have to do to address those kids who are getting ones and notifying their parents and making sure that their parents are connected to those holes and can help them through our district to get the help they need to succeed. I want to thank Principal Drake, who took time out of her busy schedule today to discuss her concerns and the action that will need to take place in the future, as well as David Brower and the principal at Truman as well. But grades are a tool. They're a tool that are supposed to help us communicate to parents. And so if we're not doing that, then we need to make changes so that that tool is helpful. My only concern is with the ones and those holes, and hoping that we can fill those in with policies that will help us communicate better with parents.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to thank everybody that's come out and done the work over the last 6 weeks. Again, I will reiterate that I don't believe the work is done. We also heard clearly last week that we need to stop and slow down, and I think this proposal that's come forward takes care of the issues at the forefront for right now to get through this semester. There's additional work that needs to be done. We all need to do that, and I would hope all of you would continue to participate and be a part of that and continue to share and reach out to any of us or your building administrators or the teachers themselves, and make sure that you're communicating the things that you see, what you feel is most important, granularity, weighting. Those are things that have been shared, but I think it's important that everybody has input into those and that we don't move haphazardly with those decisions, that we look at them, we evaluate what the impact is from them, and we look at it overall before we make any further decisions.
Great. Any more comments? I'd just like to reiterate again what I said earlier when the district was presenting the proposal, that for me it's important that we have clarity, that it's something that's understanding, that parents, teachers, students can clearly understand. And then obviously moving forward, it's paramount that it's consistent across the board, that we see this implementation in every school, every classroom, and that teachers feel like they're getting the support that they need, that students are getting the explanation that they need to be able to have comprehension, the conversations with parents, all that needs to be in place. And I know that that we're being mindful of that moving forward. So I'm happy that this resolution or this motion is being put forward tonight, and I think it's going to be a good future for our district moving forward with the changes we've made. So at this time, I would like to ask for a vote for the motion put forward on the floor right now. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we're going to have public comment. First of all, I'd like to invite Richard Champion to the podium.
So I had some questions about the Race to the Top program. It's great that we've received about $470,000, but also we contracted with a consultant. I believe the name of it is the Learner First Consultancy, and I don't know what the price of that is. I've heard a lot of numbers bandied about, including $250,000. And if that is the case, that would obviously eat up a lot of the money that we're getting from this program. And also, I believe that consultancy did a educational audit of our program, and I wonder if that information is publicly available. Also, someone brought up Cambridge testing. Part of the reason why testing went up is because we're now testing everyone as far as the educational advancement policy that we're now implementing, and we're receiving all these commendations for. But when you test everyone, obviously you spend more money. And so we can't both have the policy of educational advancement and cut down on testing. You got to choose one. You got to spend more money and do it and test everyone, or you don't do the policy and you spend less. So And I don't feel like this has been properly communicated to everyone. Obviously, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. So, like with the grading, we need to do better with communicating our policies to the members of the school or the residents within the Federal Way School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Bill Perkle.
Good evening. My name's Bill Perkle. Michelle Reed was a superintendent in District of Columbia Public Schools a few years back, and she began closing schools, firing bad teachers. You might have read about it. It was a big controversy. After she had that job for a while, she had a press conference and she says, what I've discovered is that what's going on here is not about educating children, it's about harmony among adults. And she's absolutely right. That's what's going on, was going on there, and that's what's going on here. The school board getting along with the teachers union, the public getting along with the teachers getting along with themselves. Harmony among adults is what we're trying to achieve here. Now, I'm as much for harmony as anybody. The problem is this is politics, and politics by its very nature is divisive and combative. And I don't see any kind of divisive, combating things coming out of, well, certainly not this school board because you're new, but even the last 2 or 3 school boards. It's generally universally recognized across America that the reason we can't fix our schools in America is resistance to change by the teachers union. Everybody recognizes that as the problem. And we got that problem right here. So I've written this book, The Rotten Apple, How the Teachers Union Destroyed Our Schools, and I have extra copies here. I've given them away for free. Read this, and you'll find out what's really going on under the fluff of the new grading system and standards-based initiative, all that international whatever. What's going on under that? And that's just a cover for the real story. And so I'll give you a copy, and you can read it if you like. Previous school boards, this is about my 3rd or 4th school board. Earlier, I'm not going to make any judgment about you guys because you're new. Right? The previous school boards were total cowards. Total cowards. If you ask for anything on the agenda that they think might upset the teachers union, they won't even put it on the agenda for discussion. We won't even discuss this. I'm not asking you to vote on it, yes or no. I'm just asking you to let the public come up to the microphone and weigh in on those kinds of subjects, like should the teachers wear professional dress instead of blue jeans and t-shirts. So this board, I hope, won't be the cowards that the last boards have been. And by the way, I know you're going to Quito. I've been to Quito. Enjoy yourself. Great place, good food, good wine, champagne. You know, just send us the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkle. At this time, I'd like to invite Jason Brown, who's back up to the podium, for his public comment.
Superintendent, new members of the board, I'm Jason Brown, a proud member of the evil and dreaded teachers union. And I left my jeans and t-shirt at home. I apologize. Wanted to just quickly thank the outgoing board members, Director Griffin and Director Barney, for their service. Wanted to welcome our new board members, Director McAnalloy and Gregory. I wasn't going to comment on it, but it came up earlier about the levy and possible future levies. It scares me when adults make decisions that impact kids, but to vote no on something because adults can't agree on something only is going to hurt kids. So you have the Federal Way Education Association's commitment in full support of the levy on behalf of kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Charles Hoff.
First of all, I'd like to commend you on your change of format to where we have public comment about something before you decide to vote on something. That's the way it was before 2008. That's the way it needs to return to. You people make decisions. There are people in this community that would like to contribute to that, but having public comment only at the beginning of the meeting is not the way that should be done, and was not done prior to 2008. Every item on the agenda had public comment. Not everyone commented on them, but the opportunity was there to contribute to the discussion. I think you should return to that. Now, the other issue, we've heard a lot of talk about grading here tonight. We need to understand, however, that the grades that are being given in this district are not relevant in terms of places like University of Washington. Now, I work with University of Washington now in college admissions, and I want to share again with you some information that you need to understand. If you had a 3.85 from one of our high schools and a 3.85 from Centralia, two students applying to UW, which one is likely to be more successful? So we need to raise the standards we have. And in fact, they then rank all of the schools that send 5 or more kids every year to the University of Washington. There are 369 such schools. The best public school, and I've segregated out those that have selective admission policies, the best general public school in this state is Lewis and Clark in Spokane. They are 53rd. We have 2 schools in the 340, 350 range out of 369. So an A from these schools is not necessarily going to give you what you need to be successful at UW, as shown by this. Those are the GPAs of our high schools for 5 years running at UW. They're clearly not where you'd like to be, and we need to work on this. We need to admit that we have these problems, and we need to decide on the solutions to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, tonight we have Council Member Martin Moore from the Federal Way City Council.
Oh no. I first wanted to say how it's great to see such a fantastic crowd out here. And of course, I want to take the time to invite you guys to a city council meeting. I think our seats need to be filled. But I wanted to quickly take a section of one of my favorite books called Oh, the Places You Go by Dr. Seuss. Congratulations, today's your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know. And you are the guy who'll decide where to go. You'll look up and down streets. Look them over with care. Technology. You'll look up and down streets, look them over with care. And about some you'll say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you'll too smart to go down any not so good streets. Oh, the places you'll go. I think I like this book because I think it shows us there's many different ways to do things. And I know that as elected officials, the road ahead may be challenging, but there are many opportunities. I wanted to wish you best of luck as there is a new slate and a new year starting. So I also want to take the time to congratulate our newest director, Jeffrey McAnalloy, and Carol Gregory. And I also want to say, as a former product of the Federal Way Public Schools and a former AmeriCorps member, I look forward to. I'm sorry. I'm nervous. I am nervous. I just want to say that as a former product of the Federal Way Public Schools and AmeriCorps member, I am very optimistic for brighter days for our students. I'm excited about the programs you guys have implemented, and I look forward to, as a council member, working to build a brighter future for our city and our students that are in our community. So thank you so much for your time, and I have 49 seconds left, which is pretty amazing for a political science major. So thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening, superintendent comments.
Thank you, President Peterson. I'll be very brief tonight. I've talked enough. I wanted to formally welcome Director McAnally to the Board of Directors and look forward to the perspectives that you bring. And we'll do the same with Director Gregory when she joins us in January. And I just wanted to wish everyone, thank everyone first of all for your input, your patience, but also your persistence in moving forward on the grading initiatives. And let's work together moving forward to make sure that this is a smooth implementation, but then continue the conversation. I hope what we've done is captured an opportunity to continue dialogue moving forward. And obviously, and I think the one thing we can all agree is that we've always had the kids' best interests at heart, and mistakes were made. So let's minimize those going forward. And finally, I want to thank the leadership team who's been sequestered to me for the last 3 weeks. I apologize for the misery that you've suffered as we've worked through this grading initiative together, but I think it's made us better. I appreciate the leadership that you provided to the principals. I appreciate the work that the principals have done and the staff. This has been a difficult conversation. I think Jason Brown said it earlier. Nobody agrees on any one element. And I've had personally, and I know I can speak on behalf of several of you, some of the most intense, yet I guess enlightening conversations professionally through this process. Unfortunately, we did this 2 years ago, and I don't really want to do this again in 2 years. So moving forward, and I really want to emphasize this without going into the gory details, we've implemented a new student information system that really is fantastic. It was a product that we didn't have at our disposal last 2 years. And now that we're in a place with this new product, with this new vendor who supports us beautifully, we have the infrastructure now that we can do pilot work, that we can roll products out, we can differentiate the model. We couldn't do that before. So I'll take the blame. I apologize. I met with some seniors today from Advancing Leadership, wonderful young people, and apologize to them for being the ones that really felt like the guinea pigs, and certainly that wasn't our intent. Appreciate the board's your patience in this, and your vote tonight to support this policy change. This really symbolizes a significant change in our grading beliefs and practices that we implemented a couple years ago. But at the same time, I think by going back to this place of greater clarity, of greater agreement, that we can move forward cautiously and with good data and information to make our next set of decisions. So I just want to thank everybody for that, and thank you guys for your work the last couple of weeks. I appreciate it. And finish with a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Next, we are going to move to school board comments, and I'm going to begin to my right with Director Wilson.
I don't have any tonight, thanks.
Next, Director Moore.
Well, thanks everybody for coming out, and we hope that you continue to come out and give us your feedback. I would only like to address one comment that was made tonight by Mr. Weir. Thank you for your energy into power standards for the board. We have a very in-depth set of power standards that you can visit our school district website and get, that are far more in-depth than what you have placed. And where we fail, we're glad to meet with anybody to make sure that we get it straight. The responsibility of the school board is to do what works. It really is. Some of the things that past practices we've had haven't worked. Things that we have done and done out of tradition that don't work, our responsibility is to make sure that we move the ball forward so that those things do work, and at times we've had great success, and in other times we have, as in this case, had great failures, at which point we're glad that you're walking alongside us to help us fix. The responsibility of the board and the passion of the board is to make sure that all children have an opportunity, everyone. Kids whose parents have a lot of money and are at the top of the socioeconomic charts, and those that have nothing. And that is a balancing act that we take to bed with us every night. And we take it very seriously. Will we always get it right? We won't. But we would like to partner with you. Every board member can be reached at the website and is available. I know many of the board members have gotten together with people in the community and had coffee and tried to hear what their thoughts are before making decisions. So we don't come to the table, to the dais, lightly, because we know every decision affects kids. This situation where we have made a mistake, we'll wrap our arms around every child. Every child that's affected, we'll wrap our arms around them and try to help them. So we bring that kind of passion to it, and it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in past board meetings, but it'll be great walking forward to have you partner with us for the long term. Thank you.
Director McAnally.
So first, I want to thank Superintendent New and the leadership team for all the work you've done over the last 6 weeks. Some of you have met with me. I want to thank the educators and the building administrators, the parents, all of you that have taken time to share your viewpoints, share where you're at. I want to make sure that we continue to do that we continue to communicate, that it's an open dialogue back and forth, that we move forward together collectively as a community to do the best we can for all of our students. And as we move forward tonight, I hope that we can continue to grow and build with that perspective and make sure that we meet every child exactly where they're at to give them the best opportunity in this school district to be as successful as possible right where they're at. Thank you.
I'm going to keep my comments short tonight. I do just want to echo, just thank you for coming out. And my hope moving forward as a board that we're able to find meaningful ways to continue this engagement with the community. Councilmember Moore actually touched on it about how there's people here tonight, and I think the last few months, though it's been very difficult, there's been great conversation and great, I think, new avenues that have been opened up to have discussion about things that might need to be tweaked, might need to change, to share concerns, cares, comments. And I think moving forward as a board, that'll be one of the challenges here in the new year, is just finding ways of meaningful communication, meaningful community involvement where parents feel heard, students feel heard, staff members feel like they're a part of what this board is doing moving forward. And I just want to thank my dad for coming out tonight. All the way from Shoreline, came down here to see me tonight in the audience. He was the one that inspired me. It was a C in 4th grade on a spelling test that I came home with, and I thought it was kind of funny. And it was him. It wasn't a teacher. It was him that said, "Danny, you can get a C on something maybe if you don't understand it, if you try your best." But he's like, "I know in spelling, right now all you got to do is study and you do your homework and you can get an A." And from that time on, I didn't get anything below an A from that on. It changed my mindset, and it was a parent like that believed in me, that said, "No, I want to see the best in you." And that's really, as a district, that's what we have to do. If a student doesn't have a parent contending for him, we have the teachers, the staff, fellow students, fellow parents that come alongside our students that are having a difficult time and saying, "You know what, this might be right where you're at, but you can do better than this." And not stretch kids beyond what their ability is, but to celebrate that they can grow, that they can become better, that we can see those power standards that they might be lacking, and that we now have this ability to see, hey, here's this area that we can help you, advance in, to do better in, and to learn, and so you don't have this hole in your education. And so I think the future's bright for us moving forward as we continue to have dialogue, discussion moving forward. And just on one other light note, I was able to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Green Gables Elementary this last Thursday, a school that I didn't realize had been around for 20 years, and just the rich history there. It was just a great night of having parents and teachers and staff, past principals, past teachers all come out and just share their experiences and their love for that school and that community. So it was great to be a part of, and I had a great time being there as well. At this time, we're going to move on to our EP&O levy ballot proposition. Sally McLean, Assistant Superintendent, is going to be making that presentation.
Good evening, President Peterson, members of the board, Superintendent New, and our audience. This is my first opportunity to actually talk to you publicly beyond the work study about the upcoming Educational Programs and Operations Levy, and I would like to take this moment to thank Deputy Superintendent Mark Davidson for doing my presentation 2 weeks ago when I was unavailable due to some family circumstances. So tonight, you will actually be asked to adopt a resolution that will place the Educational Programs and Operations Levy in front of our voters on February 11th, 2014. The resolution in front of you tonight for board approval does 6 key things. It defines the ballot proposition language. For members of the audience, I did print that page that has the sample ballot proposition language on the back table. It sets the election date, and remember, we only have 4 dates in any calendar year to select. It sets the maximum levy amounts in each of the 4 years that the levy will be asking the voters for approval for. It sets the levy years. It estimates the tax rate, which is always an interesting process because what our voters approve in every school district in the state of Washington is a maximum dollar amount, not a tax rate. And it authorizes participation in the voters pamphlet. It is optional to participate in the voters pamphlet, but here in Federal Way, we have a longstanding history of participating in the voters pamphlet, and that is included in your resolution this evening. So resolution number 2013-29, the partial ballot proposition language for you this evening talks about the fact that this is a replacement levy which funds educational programs and school operations, including classroom support, technology and security staff, athletics and activities, facility maintenance, and transportation. I think there's probably three key questions that we'll spend some more time talking about in future board meetings, but just to frame those future conversations, I have a little information for you this evening. The first question, obviously, is why do we need a replacement EP&O levy or Educational Programs and Operations levy? I think another key question is what does the EP&O levy pay for? And then obviously people want to know how much this levy will cost. And again, between now and February 11th, assuming you adopt the resolution in front of you this evening, we will continue to talk about these key questions in more depth. Simply stated, why do we need a levy? The expiring levy pays for almost 1/5 or 20% of our daily operations. An easy way to think about this is the educational business is dependent upon people. We still have people teaching students, feeding students, transporting students, cleaning up after students. And basically, if you think about the levy and not having a levy, we would lose about 1 out of every 5 staff members who support our educational programs. We need a levy. So another way to look at that is this renewal levy allows current programs to continue. We're not looking at the Educational Programs and Operations levy as a means to expand programs or to expand anything other than to maintain our current level of programs. Some of the things that the EP&O levy pays for are opportunities for students above and beyond what the state provides. Our levy pays for the general fund costs related to athletics and activities. It pays for the local costs of AmeriCorps, the Air Force JROTC, International Baccalaureate, Cambridge, College Board exams, for example, and it provides additional support for students. Obviously, we'll have a lot more detail about the educational programs, operations levies, and those opportunities for students to talk about at future meetings. But we also know another way to look at this is that the EP&O levy pays for 8% of all of our classroom teachers, or roughly class size would increase by about 2 without the classroom teachers that are paid for by the EP&O. The EP&O pays 100% of the additional time and responsibility pay for all of our teachers. It pays for 16% of staff that are considered classified staff. That includes secretaries, custodians, maintenance, grounds, security, and technology staff. So again, the Educational Programs and Operations Levy, while it is deemed an excess levy, is really an integral and core part of what we do every day in the school district. How much will this EP&O levy cost? This is a $53 million replacement levy. It's identical to the last voter authorization. The estimated tax rate is $4.95. Again, identical to the last voter authorization. Although the voters don't authorize a tax rate, that's an estimated amount. Subject to Washington legislative action, it is anticipated that the legal authority and actual tax collections and tax rates will continue to be less than what we're asking for with the $53 million replacement levy. That's largely due to the concepts of local effort assistance or levy equalization and the unfolding impacts of the McCleary decision. As I framed at the beginning of this presentation, the EP&O resolution in front of you for board action this evening defines the ballot proposition language in resolution number 2013-29. It sets the election date for February 11th, 2014. It sets the maximum levy amount, which is $53 million in each of the 4 calendar years. The levy calendar years are calendar year 2015, 16, 17, and 18. The estimated tax rate is $4.95 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. And by authorizing participation in the voters pamphlet, the school district is obligated to advertise for a pro and con committee those committee applicants will respond to me and be appointed within the King County election timelines of December 27th. So that concludes my formal presentation this evening related to the resolution in front of you. Are there any comments or questions prior to your action?
Board members, any comments or questions?
Sally, thanks again for the work that you have done to put this information together for us. And again, it seems like to lose that would be devastating to the educational opportunities of our kids. Is that a fair?
That is a fair assessment. I think you can talk to community members who lived through the 70s when we had double levy failures there. And actually, we're still paying the price for those double levy failures in terms of the current state funding formulas. Or
So-
our students are still paying the price.
Are there partners that will be working on this where people can get involved?
Well, I think earlier you heard President Jason Brown and the FWA President Jason Brown talk about FWA's support of the levy. The Citizens for Federal Way Schools will, I assume, while they haven't taken action yet, will continue their normal support of the Educational Programs and Operations Levy. And we will continue our presentation to other public and civic committees throughout the city as we have in the past.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll just touch on that as well. You know, obviously here in the new year as we ramp up with a levy, if we move forward with this resolution tonight, it's the opportunity to partner with all these groups. You know, the parents, the teachers, community leaders, people in the city, legislature, everywhere, just to really get on board, to come together, and to really see this coming forward. And so that's going to be a critical piece, I know, moving forward if we choose to move with this levy. So with that, we have a resolution, number 21329. Does somebody want to put that forward?
President Peterson, I move that the Board of Education adopt Resolution 2013-29, providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the district at a special election to be held on February 11, 2014, a ballot proposition to determine whether excess taxes should be levied to pay part of the cost of educational programs and operations support of the district.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Unanimously. There we go. I finally got it out. We're going to move now to board assessment of the meeting. Board members, you have that orange goldenrod colored sheet in your packet that you can fill out this time. I'd like to ask Ms. Poppich, is there any action items tonight?
No action items tonight.
And with that, we will adjourn our meeting.